everybody, Rosematter here, and I have a confession to make. I hate horror games. Well, not really. I hate playing horror games, and this was especially true as a kid. But media has a way of sneaking scary moments into otherwise child-friendly content, and it's these moments of unexpected fear that have a way of sticking with us. So in the spirit of Halloween, I figured I'd share these moments with you. So without further ado, let's get into it. The top 7 moments in gaming that scared me as a kid. Alright, let's get this out of the way first. The quintessential game that appears on any 90s kid's scariest video game list. The original Resident Evil for the PS1. This was the first true scary game I ever experienced, and it's what started my love-hate relationship with horror games. Sure, by today's standards, it's cheesy as hell.
Jill, here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you.
But it is arguably the game that defined the survival horror genre. So, what moment from Resident Evil scared me the most? If you're guessing the iconic scene with the dogs crashing through the window, you're wrong. I'm sure it freaked me out, but it didn't ingrain itself onto my psyche the way the encounter with the first zombie did. As cheesy as the game was up to this point, this moment right here let the player know it was not f***ing around, as it puts you on edge for the rest of the game, making you hesitant to open the next door or explore the next room in fear of what horrible creature you might come across next. To say the game has aged poorly is putting it mildly.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
But damn if watching that cutscene even today doesn't take me back to being 7 years old and hiding behind a pillow watching my dad play. Good times.
This house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
Like I said in the intro, I don't usually go out of my way to play games that advertise themselves as scary. But there are games that surprise you with how dark and creepy they are. ABE'S Odyssey for the PS1 is one such game. It had a fantastic sense of atmosphere and was probably the scariest game I actually managed to play through to completion when I was a kid. You play as Abe, a Mudokan slave who works at the meat processing plant Rupture Farms. Abe happens to overhear a meeting with the heads of the company, who have found their next meat specialty, his own race of Mudokons, and it's up to him to escape from the farm, rescuing as many of his fellow Mudokons as possible along the way. There are 99 Mudokons throughout the game to save, and multiple endings based on how many of your friends you save or kill. Now, because I was a dumb kid, I wasn't very good at the game, and if you rescue less than 50 Mudokons, you get this end cutscene.
'Cause here I am, face to face. Now let's go on. Now do it. Yeah, Mullet, look. He was killing it. Did you see him? Yeah, he didn't do much. But Abe, he's one of us. He wasn't any good. Now, Buzz. No, guys, no. Let him.
Yep, that's right. Our lovable protagonist Abe just got turned into mincemeat, and there's no one to blame but you. You didn't play well enough, and now he's dead. Are you happy with yourself? Needless to say, 9-year-old me was so disturbed by this cutscene that I didn't touch the game after that, and thus never got the good ending. Sorry, Abe. Okay, show of hands. Who here remembers Mr. Bones for the Sega Saturn? Anyone? Well, I don't blame you if you've never heard of it. It's definitely a forgotten gem of the 90s, and a very unique game to say the least. The story is, well, I'm just going to quote the Mr. Bones Wikipedia page. Degulian, a mad philosopher, sets out to purify the world with evil by playing a special set of drums in which he is able to tap into a primal power which he calls skeletal magnetism, and summon the dead from their graves as his skeletal soldiers. Yeah, this game is fucking weird. There's 2 big things I remember about this game. The cutscenes that combine CGI with real actors, and how controller-throwing, rage-inducing, insanely fucking hard it was. No joke, last year after finding our old copy of the game, my whole family sat around for hours trying to beat the game and failed. But back to the cutscenes. I feel even 20 years later, they still look pretty damn good. Almost too good because, man, they freaked me out as a kid. Skeletons in general are unnerving as it is, but slap some red glowing eyes on them and forget it. If I had to choose one specific moment that unnerved me the most, it would be the opening cutscene when the skeletons are first awakened. For some reason, the titular protagonist Mr. Bones isn't affected by the skeletism and is quickly found out and hunted by Dagulion's minions.
Somebody's messing with something he shouldn't be messing with. Now we're living proof of that. Undead proof anyway. You will be dissolved. Uh-oh.
Is it strange that this scared me so much? I don't know, this probably looks pretty lame by today's standards, but I guess skeletons just freak me out, even to this day. But at this point, I don't care, I just want to...
I'm gonna sit in this electric
I forgot about the skeleton. Moving on to the masters of unexpected scary moments in kids' games, Nintendo. Bet you're surprised it took this long for something from them to show up, huh? And I'm going to go with a pretty typical choice here. The REDEADS from Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. To be honest, there were a lot of things I could have picked from this game. The wall masters, the skeletons that appear in Hyrule Field at night, whatever this thing is. Seriously, why is this game rated E again? But it was these zombie-like screeching hump-you-to-death fucks that had the biggest impact on me. Sure, they look creepy enough, but what really catapults them into nightmare fuel is how they attack you. When Link is within their range, they will paralyze him with a bone-chilling scream, jump on his back, and gradually drain his health by squeezing him to death. They may not seem very scary nowadays, but this was at a time when there weren't many zombie games on the market, especially not from Nintendo. I hated dealing with REDEADS so much that I had to get my younger brother, who was only 5 at the time, to run through Hyrule Market for me because I was too scared to do it myself. And before you ask, no, I didn't play Majora's Mask until I was in my teens, so it didn't make it on my list. Although it absolutely would have if I'd played it when I was younger. I mean, basically all of Majora's Mask would be on this list. That game is fucked up. And speaking of Nintendo... Alright guys, when I say scary moments in Super Mario 64, what's the first thing that comes to mind? The inconspicuous piano in Boo's mansion that suddenly grows teeth and attacks you when you get too close? Oh, what about your encounters with Bowser? He was pretty intimidating by 1996 standards. Well, for me, it's a certain creature from the level Jolly Roger Bay. The level starts out harmless enough with its relaxing music and serene atmosphere, but as you swim further and deeper into the water, you notice something peeking its head out of a sunken ship. This little piece of nightmare fuel is UNAGI the eel. Just look at it. Its piercing eyes, rows of jagged teeth, ugh. Up until this point, the only concern you had was maintaining your air supply, but now you have a real, physical threat staring you in the face. I'll be real here, I've always had a problem with underwater sections in video games, even to this day. It's that combination of slow movement, usually janky controls, and the constant risk of drowning, while also having to deal with enemies that can come at you from any angle. And this level had all those issues in spades. Oh, and of course, you have to get close to UNAGI in order to get it to come out of the hole, in which if you so much as touch it, your health is depleted, causing you to frantically have to swim to the surface to avoid drowning. Oh, and what's this? There's a star on the tip of its tail you have to grab, and I have to repeat the whole terrifying process again while trying not to get eaten alive? You know what? I'm good with 119 stars, thanks. I may be cheating a bit for this entry because rather than one specific moment, I'm going to cover something from a variety of games, and that's the game over screen. Maybe it's just me, but man, game over screens from the 90s did not play around. They went out of their way to make you feel bad for fucking up. I'm going to go through a few of the game overs that unnerved me the most. Okay, first off, we've got one from Donkey Kong Country. It's simple enough, but I mean, look at it. Donkey and Diddy's hurt expressions that seem to ask the player, how could you do this to us? That sad, somber music. This is a game over screen that made you feel guilty for failing. Next up is from yet another Nintendo game, Conker's Bad Fur Day. There are multiple game over screens depending on how you die, whether by drowning, having your body smashed into pieces, etc. But the worst for me is the one where Conker is forced to spend the rest of his life propping up the villain's broken table. The way he feebly writhes around with a pained look on his face makes you feel like shit for what you've done. The next entry is from a game you might be surprised to see on the list, Sonic CD. Such a colorful, happy game, until you fail. Then you're greeted with this game over. I mean, what? What even was that? Do I need to explain why this would upset 5-year-old me? Last on the list is objectively the scariest one, and it's the various game overs from Resident Evil 2. The fact you actually see the last moments of your characters' lives before they're brutally killed by zombies, or dogs, or any other host of enemies ensures that you never want to have it happen again. Maybe this is just nostalgia talking, but I feel like game over screens today don't have that same oomph that they used to. It's truly a dying art. No pun intended. The final moment is from a game I'm sure no one will be surprised to see on here, Silent Hill. Once again, I didn't actually play through this game, but I watched my older, braver cousins play, and it left such an impression on me as a kid. It was hard to pick one single moment from this game that stands out as the scariest, so I'm going to go with something that happens throughout the game, the radio static. Let me set up the scenario. You've arrived in a town cloaked in fog looking for your lost daughter. You wander the empty streets with no sign of human life while also being attacked by demonic creatures. You feel alone, lost, and helpless. Finally, you find yourself in a cafe and even manage to meet another survivor. Things seem to have finally calmed down. You can take a breath, collect your thoughts. But then a radio nearby makes an ominous noise before some pterodactyl-looking f***s crash through the windows. This is the introduction to the alert system in the game. The radio will start to make that noise whenever there's an enemy nearby, and that sound is almost scarier than the enemies themselves, because it conditions you to expect something when you hear it. This is the one moment on the list that caused me to fear something rather than just perpetuate fears I already had. I was already afraid of zombies and deep water as a kid, so those moments I previously mentioned tapped into the fear I already had. But this freaking game actually made me anxious about static. Even to this day, hearing radio or TV static in real life gives me the creeps. Of everything on this list, this is the one that left the biggest scar on my psyche. I can go back now as an adult and play through any of the games on this list, except for Silent Hill. Even with its dated graphics and clunky gameplay, I still can't bring myself to play it almost 20 years later. And if that's not the sign of a good horror game, I don't know what is. So guys, that's my top 7 moments in gaming that scared me as a kid. I hope you enjoyed watching me reminisce about what a weenie I used to be, and hey, I'd love to hear about what moments traumatized you most as a kid, so please leave them in the comments down below. Until then, I hope you guys have a safe and happy Halloween, and until then, have a good one. Bye guys.